subject. It was very rushed, the last meeting. And I called Commissioner Nail afterwards and apologized because I felt like I was actually running him off as opposed to letting him finish. He had a lot more to say. And we had, frankly, had more questions too. When you come on up, Commissioner. When you have a new agency that's being created and you're folding in from other agencies, I think inherently that gives rise to a lot of questions about the transfers and what's happening in the new agency. And so I think that was, I felt like we needed to ask more questions regarding that. I know the Commissioner has provided to everyone in the committee, you have I put on your desk, again, a copy of his PowerPoint on the 2017 budget for community supervision. In addition, the Commissioner has brought with him an org chart, a ratio number of admin and staff members that's here, a page on that, and then some bullet points on some issues that we have discussed offline. And so I want to make sure you have those before you. And Commissioner, I think what we just try to jump into it, and to be efficient with everyone's time, is that the concerns that I've raised and some other members have raised with me, one of whom is not here right now, but is that with the transfer of and consolidation, if you will, from pardons and paroles and DOC, all under your umbrella now, one of the questions that keeps coming up is to what extent there's a need for the current staffing. And your discussion with me was that right now it's hard to assess that, even because you've only had the agency for 6 months. So I'd like you to talk a little bit to that issue first, and then we'll let some questions follow from there.
Sure, I will. Members of the committee, and let me tell you, Mr. Chairman, how much I appreciated that phone call. It was certainly unnecessary, but I do greatly appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to come back today and address some of those very concerns. One thing interesting, when criminal justice reform was passed and House Bill 310 was passed, when we talk about efficiencies and effectiveness, that does not always absolutely equate to cost savings. In many times, and in the case of this and the criminal justice reform effort of 2017, is actually going to look at probation and parole, or DCS specifically, as to the officers. The goal was simply to create an agency that is more efficient, more effective, without asking for additional resources. So I wanted to make that. There were also several committee meetings last year with 310 where there were some that would say there's no way we could implement this and be budget neutral. So I wanted to remind the committee that, in fact, that's exactly what's happening. We're not asking for any additional money in 16 or 17. None whatsoever. All we're operating in is monies that are transferred over for functions that were being done. So I wanted to make sure that was understood. Also, when we talk about the staffing, specifically as it relates to, and if we could, I'd like to, Mr. Chairman, talk first about the officers. That's our lion's share of staff, about 15 sworn positions, and then address some of the transfer of the administrative positions. When we talk about our current officer caseload, and if you'll look here, there's a sheet here that talks about the American Probation Parole Association. Just as a recap, specialized, high, and administrative are basically our three types of caseloads. APPA recommends a 1 to 30. We carry 1 to 45, one officer to 45. For high, it's 1 to 60 recommended. We're twice that, 1 to 120. And for administrative, the recommendation is 1 officer to 120 offenders, and we're 1 to 200. Now, the caseloads, not only do they continue to grow, you have a stacking effect. I think at the last committee I mentioned that the average probation sentence handed out is 9 years. We have over 40,000 cases that start up each year. I can remember back over 15 years ago when I was director of probation, and the caseloads or the entire population was 72,000 that was on felony probation. And right now we have just over 180,000. So you already see the system is outpacing our staffing ratio. The other thing that I thought was important and I'd mention is the 2017 criminal justice reform is looking to address some of those issues that continues to compound the problem. Also, when we talk about 1,500 sworn staff, that does not mean that 1,500 are carrying caseloads. They are sworn staff, but many of them are chiefs. Many of them are court officers who work the courtroom and serve the courts as statutorily required to do so. Many of them are working in day reporting centers. So just because they're sworn in that 1,500 doesn't necessarily mean they're carrying a caseload. Also, our historical trend for vacancies has run about 10 to 15%. We have to have those vacancies. They're necessary. But there's some things that compound that. Typically, our hiring takes a little bit longer. There's polygraphs involved. There's psychological evaluations involved. There's comprehensive background involved. So the speed to market is not as quick as some hiring is usually done. So I wanted to make a mention of that. And also, when you talk about staffing for rural and urban circuits, I can assure you Fulton County would not be in hard measure by losing one position or having a vacancy for 2 months. But when you talk rural Georgia, you take one person off that caseload, and sometimes an officer's workload has doubled in the meantime. And somebody has to continue to carry those caseloads. I mentioned the criminal justice reform. One thing I failed to mention was back in 2001, pardons and paroles had 18 parole officers eliminated from their budget. And then going back even farther, and I'm sorry, that was 2010. In 2001, when I was with probation, we had 100 positions eliminated. And I can tell you right now, we never recovered. We never recovered from that. So if we're going to talk about being safe, keeping our community safer, be more efficient, we at least got to have the opportunity to do that. Also, keeping our folks. Our officers are required to have a 4-year college degree. So they come on board, it's very easy for them to leave because they've got an array of options. And when you have an officer come and say, no, I'm going into the pharmaceutical business as a sales rep because I can make a lot more money and I've got a 4-year degree to do that. That's what we're competing with. Also, this is a group of officers that has not received a pay increase as the other sworn officers throughout the state have. GBI, Department of Public Safety, DNR, when they have received pay raises, this group of officers has not received a pay increase. So, and I'm certainly not asking for one. We would certainly take one, but these are the things that we've been up against for the years. And that was part of the criminal justice reform effort, is what can we do to increase the effectiveness and the efficiencies without growing it and without coming and asking to hire more officers. So that's where we are coming from with that, from an officer perspective. And, you know, I heard right now our officers start out at 32-1, 4-year college degree, $32,000 is what they start out with. And it won't be too long after a 2 or 3 year correctional officer with increases will be at that pay. So we're competing with that. And please don't misunderstand me. If anybody deserves that, it's those correctional officers with the hard work that they do day in and day out. When we talk, I had some numbers run. When we look at the transfer of positions coming over, when we look at right now our position to employee ratio, right now when you talk about budget, we have 3 positions in our budget. That's one position handling $53 million in essence. When we talk about our human resources, we have 9 positions. That's one position for every 220 employees. When we talk about our accounting, again, $22 million per position for those handling of those positions. When we talk about our information technology, we took over to DCS the IT staff that was at parole. No IT staff from corrections came over. Yet we're quadrupling our responsibility as an IT entity, not only to Department of Community Supervision, but we're also providing service to State Board of Pardons and Paroles for the release decision making. We're also providing service to the Georgia Commission on Family Violence, and we're also providing IT services to the misdemeanor oversight. So there are 4 additional infrastructures that we're providing service to, and no staff has increased there. That in itself is efficiency. The other thing, when we talk about IT specifically, for their programming, 14 staff, that equals 1 staff for 157 employees. When we talk about network and support, 8, that's 1 staff member for every 314 employees. Now, you see the org chart there. There are 5 divisions in our agency. It's a slim agency. We did not create positions that were not already there and in existence. You'll see the 5. We have field operations, which covers our 49 judicial circuits, court board and field services. You'll see the blocks under there that represent the work functions that they are responsible for. Our chief information officer and our chief financial officer. This year alone, our chief financial officer has had to navigate between 3 different budgets. And that in itself can be rather cumbersome. When we talk about senior leadership, there are 5 in an agency of 2,200, 5 classified as senior leaders. That equates 1 senior leader for 440 employees. When we talk about communications, that's 1 communications officer for 733 employees. When we talk about our legal department, we're a legal department of 1 general counsel. So that we have 3 in the legal department, but 1 general counsel. We have an administrative assistant assigned and a paralegal there, but that equates to 1 staff member for 733 employees. And when we talk policy, we have 2 individuals that handle our policies, and that right there equates to 1 for 2,200 because we're operating off of 2 policies right now. We have 299 policies that have to be revised and rewritten. The governor's recommended budget is just over $160 million for an estimated of 2,200 field positions. So the point that I want to make, and I want to give you time to certainly answer or ask questions, is all we're saying and asking is let us get to the starting line before we get a twisted ankle. Let us at least get to the starting line. Right now, it is very difficult when you're pulling from 3 different agencies, and we're in the 7th month right now. We've made tremendous strides. March 1st, we will roll out our unified case plans where we will begin to overlay probationers and parolees and be able to see where those efficiencies are. Next year, we'll be able to start looking at our leases and our real estate, shrinking the square footage of where we are and putting more officers in the field. But that's not going to happen if we can't at least be given the chance to get to June 30th and get to the starting line, where then it's only DCS that stands here held accountable for their budget. Right now, you have some coming over from GDC. You have some coming over from parole. Personnel functions still have to be done some way, shape, form, or fashion. It still has to carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Al, you have a question?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've listened very closely to you, Commissioner, and I've just got a couple of questions. But first, your caseload and work size makes the Israelites under Pharaoh look like they were on vacation. But concerns me because I've seen your mission statement, but I've seen your real numbers. And you know, just in vernacular of a Liberty County guy, you're a train wreck waiting to happen. There's no way in the world you can continue when you are double the national average on the high side. You're coming in at $32,000. And it's always concerned me because we get all upset when the feds come in and take over. When we invite this by how we're handling it, you can't keep 4-year degreed people and pay them this kind of money. You're lucky to get them in the first place. And they can be very loyal, but a husband or a wife at home gonna need something more than loyalty when the light bill comes due. I don't know. You said you didn't ask for anything, and Commissioner, I appreciate your attempt to be frugal, but I just really think you've got to ask. Everybody else comes in here and asks.
Yes, sir.
And from the Supreme Court down, and we cannot keep people safe and not have the things in place. Because we make some mistakes. Some people out on parole don't need to be out yet, and they need to be under supervision. And there's no way you can keep the morale in the department with the kind of ratios I'm looking at that you have. And I would suggest, whether or not it happens or not, I would holler for a pay raise for my people every day. Because to me, as the commissioner, if not for yourself, you sure owe it to that person who spent 4 years out there to be able to tell them they can look forward to something. I find it just almost disgraceful. I don't care, the fancy charts and the consolidation, all that looks good. But you got to have a little straw to make bricks. And you can't be thrown out there in the wilderness, and it's not politically popular to say things like this. But let me tell you something. Your end of the business is not in the money-making business. Y'all ain't going to be able to cut money because you ain't got nothing to cut. You need to be talking about somebody putting some more money in your pot, and you need to be screaming to the high heavens to get it, whether or not you get it or not. Don't let me say you didn't get nothing because you didn't ask for anything. If you don't want nothing but pay raises, you need to ask for them. And you need to ask for them in a hurry, because if I was working for you, you came out here and didn't ask for me a pay raise, I'd be awful upset with you. I might not tell you to your face, but I'd sure tell your friends about you.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate that, Representative Williams, and I'll give you a resounding amen. But I'm also going to be a man and an agency of our word. When we told the legislature last year that we were going to enter this year not asking for an increase, I'm gracious that the governor did allow for 3% for merit increases, and that's going to help. And we're very, very appreciative of it. But I want to make sure that we also look to do what we can with what we have and be able to say that matter-of-factly. But I've at least got to be given till July 1 to at least get the car built so we can turn the engine and get going down the road. I appreciate your remarks, sir.
Mr. Commissioner, is it not true that you are receiving, and the entire agency is receiving, a 3% merit-based increase? Is that not true?
There's 3% that has been appropriated for merit increase. That is not across the board, as you know. That is for merit-based increase. That's correct.
That's right. So those that deserve to have a salary increase will have that money available to you to administer as you see fit. Is that correct? That
is correct, sir. Okay. And we're very, very appreciative of the governor's recommendation for that.
All right. Well, second point is that I heard Representative Williams say that your caseload is twice the national average. Could you point to me in your documentation where you've provided us with information concerning the national average?
Yes, sir. Well, not the national average, the recommendation.
That's exactly what I'm saying. There's a difference between a recommendation and a national average.
Yes, sir. And that would be like, keep in mind, one of the very challenges.
So wait a minute. So your documentation does not include anything about a national average then?
No, sir.
Okay.
And I never alleged that it did.
I'm just trying to clarify.
It has what the national appPA, our professional body, recommends for caseload carrying officers. Now, it would be extremely challenging because up until this consolidation, Georgia was only one of 3 states that operated a bifurcated system. So it was not comparing apples to oranges. In fact, most of your probation systems throughout the nation are operated at the county level. So it makes it very, very difficult. Even if you look at the Bureau of Justice statistics, a lot of times you're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges, and that's why we operate on what the recommended average is by the professional body, if you will, of community corrections.
All right, Representative Bowser.
Thank you. I think you just stole some of my thunder as far as comparative numbers, because I was very interested in that. I know that's the recommendation, but I was interested in what other states were doing and what their caseloads look like. But it seems like we're not going to be able to provide those numbers.
It's extremely difficult. I'm not so sure that even if we could, that one could stand behind them matter of factly. And I'll give you another example is you prior to this consolidation being a bifurcated state, some states dealt with misdemeanors, so they threw those in there. Some states aren't armed. They don't carry a weapon. Their caseloads are vastly different. Some have dual caseload capacity because they rely on their community services boards, things of that nature. It's just far too complex to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. And second question, if I may, Mr. Chairman, what is your turnover rate?
Turnover rate right now is 10 to 15%.
Okay.
When it came over from probation, and Assistant Commissioner Maurer, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think probation was running right at about, they were at 17%, they got it down to about 14%, and parole was running just under 9%.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Floor Leader Rogers.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate you being here today. And this is not a question; it's just maybe an observation,
yes,
or whatever, based on the chairman's comments and based on Representative Williams' comments. One of the things that we've been very successful at in this committee, we work with the GBI and work with DNR and a few others, is a phase-in sort of thing.
Yes, sir.
That we looked at a target thing of here's where we probably need to be, and maybe we can phase in over 3 years. And obviously, it's too late for that. And I appreciate you being a man of your word. But next year in discussions with the governor and other things, that may be something that you guys might want to look at is trying to do a phase-in aspect.
I appreciate that guidance, sir, and I think we'll be postured to do that. But right now, when you're trying to pull amongst two other agencies to come into one, I don't really see a way to objectively and honestly do that. So I appreciate that.
The key to that is to look at it next year and get some stability under your feet, and then that gives you a little bit of leverage.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Just as a final note, I think you made it very clear, Commissioner Nail, that you're still in a transition, of incorporating all the transfers of personnel and now resources into the department. So what I'd like to ask you to do is, if you would, looking at what the comments you've heard here today and the step increase has maybe been suggested and the suggestions of Representative Williams, those things, keep those in mind. Also look at what your staffing needs are, both administrative and in the field.
Yes, sir.
And then let's look at that going forward and have a candid discussion about that, what those needs are, whether those needs need to be increased or decreased, either which way, but have a candid discussion about that next year after you've had time to work through this a full year and a half.
Yes, sir. Gladly.
Okay. Anything else in the committee? If not, I want to thank the Commissioner again for coming back and rehashing, I think, some important information that did not get presented before because of the shortened schedule.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we will stand adjourned, and I appreciate everyone coming today.